go over the MWBE report that's been prepared by Mrs. Jefferson. And I did have a couple of questions. Thank you all for being here. And I did have a couple of questions, and the questions I have before I have to scoot out of here is, what do these numbers look like in terms of the percentage of the total? And what do they look like compared to previous years, at least the prior couple of years?
Okay, so if you go all the way, BJ, can you go all the way to the section that says charts?
Oh, I do not have it pulled up, but I can do that.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Nope, I think I can do that. Hold on.
Yep, so I gave you screen sharing capacity, so you should be good to do that.
So President Scott, these are the goals from the first year and the second year. The goals for,
sorry to pause, but your screen isn't shared yet. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see the share screen. If you click on that, you'll be able to.
Yeah, I did that. That's why I was saying I didn't know.
18,
it wasn't
18
telling
to
me.
20?
It wasn't telling me that that it's sharing. So I'll try it again and see if it does it.
Well, give me one moment. I can try to pull it up as well.
Is it sharing now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I did it 3 times. The third time was a charm, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So this chart will give you everything that you just asked for.
Okay.
In the first year of this was 18-19, and our MWBE goals aggregate for public works construction is 30%. So if you look at where it says 18-19, you'll see 29%. And then for 19-20, you'll see 37.4%.
Yes.
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 And the same thing for the next one for Public Works Consulting.
Wow.
If you look at 18-19, we came in at 17.3. And for 19-20, we came in at 31%. If you will go down to the next one for Professional Services Consulting. Now, I was going to explain some of this because we kind of went backwards in our numbers. But that's okay. When I explain it, you'll understand how and why. First year, we did 10%. The goal for this is 30%. The second year, we did 3%. Now, when we set the goals for this, as well as the next area that I'm going to cover, commodities, we set the goals with no prior knowledge of how we would be able to do within our marketplace. And when we came in at 10% the first year, I was like, well, hey, this is the first year. But then I took a closer look at our marketplace. We do not do a lot of professional services consulting within our region of upstate New York. We do with the city what we call professional services contracting, but we call them in terms of reporting professional services and professional services other. Other being that we work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, we work with a lot of community-based organizations, and we do professional services agreements, others with those audiences, but we don't do a lot with the people that would meet the definition of what professional consultants are. And those would be like your HR, your law, your education, consultants, people like that. We don't do a lot of business with those types. So we actually were going to be going to the council to make a recommendation that we relook at this number. When I crunched some numbers internally, I factored in that we probably could do about 10 to 15% per year if the opportunity presented itself. And we proved that from year one where we did 10%. The same thing applies to the next area, which is commodities.
Yeah.
So all of these, I gave you goals. This is numbers. We left off the goals. So the goals for 221 would be 11.9%, and for 44 would be 4%. Now, what this says is that in year one, we did 221 contracts with MWBE businesses under the commodities area for 11.9% of the business. And in 1920, we only did 44, which gave us 4% of the business. Again, this is an area that we didn't have any predetermined idea of how we were going to do. We set the goals at 5% for year one, 10% for year two, and 15% for year three. We're entering year three now. And for this, we said, and the reason why we said it this way was because we have term contracts, and it's really, really hard for us to determine which term contracts are going to be, we're going to be needing to extend and which ones we're going to be canceling out and rebidding. This year we were hit very hard because of COVID. We chose to extend every single contract, term contract. We pretty much was in a position to do so. We did it. So we did not do we did not do a lot of bidding out. We did not bring in new business. So what you'll see here is new business. It is not a repeat. It's saying that we did contracts with organizations or businesses that were MWBE vendors. So with that said, again, for this, we're asking council to consider the fact that we may need to lower the goal on this to be within our marketplace based upon what we do with term contracts and the fact that term contracts have the opportunity to be renewed up to 3 years. Many of the, now next year, I think we'll see these numbers go up because we're not going to be, this year we'll see these numbers go up because we're not going to be able to extend past the 3rd year with all of these contracts that we renewed this year. So we're thinking that anywhere between 10 to 15% or setting it at 15%, which would be a stretch goal. We showed that we can do 12% because we did that in the first year. So we're thinking that 15 would be a realistic goal for us to set going forward for this particular area. So that kind of gives you everything in a nutshell. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And I got to run. Thank you all.
All right. So for the rest of you that are on the call, what we were going to do was we were going to start with a little bit of history lesson for you because we know that we have a lot of new council members who may not know how we got to the point of where we are right now with the MWBE legislation. So I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit. In 1989, the city did its last revision up until 2018. The city did its last revision to the MWBE process. I don't call it a program because when I came on board, I was told it was a program. But when I looked at it, I realized that very quickly that it was more a process than a program. The prior MWBE process looked at African Americans, Hispanics, and women. And because Mayor Warren ran on a campaign of inclusion, one of the things that I quickly realized when I came here in February of 2014 was that this program was not inclusive. It did not include all the areas that New York State under Article 15A said that we need to be including. And I know that that is usually predicated upon doing a study to determine what you are lacking in your areas. So I began to look at what has the state done that is inclusive of our region so that if we don't have to spend $450,000 for a disparity study. And so went to the state and got a copy of the disparity study, got the numbers for our region and began to look at those and study them. In about 2016, realized that we needed to update the process and to an actual MWBE program. Another study was being done, had been done in 2015 by the state of New York that would give us some updated numbers. And in the latter part of 16, early 17, it came out and we began to develop the process that we have today. as the MWBE ordinance 2018-54. It was approved by City Council, Mayor and City Council in June for July of 2018. And since July of 2018 to the present, we have continued to track our numbers in 4 key areas. I would like to state that we are, when developing this process, myself and my predecessor, Charlie Zedek, who was the former purchasing agent, we really sat down with every department that we felt would be impacted by what we're pulling together. We sat down with DES, of course, because all of our public works contracts come out of that area. We sat down with law, and we brought everybody to the table. We sat down with NBD because they do a lot of RFPs, and we sat down with our purchasers or our buyers so that we can have an understanding of how these numbers that we were tracking on the commodity side was going to impact. I see a note that Michael Patterson's trying to get into the meeting, BJ. There we go. So anyway, so we began to track these numbers, and what I have sent you and what you will have hard copies of as well is a summary of the 2018-19 year, a summary of the 19-20 year, and then a 2-year summary aggregate total of the numbers. What we are going to be reviewing with you today is going to be referring to the 19-20 numbers and the 2-year summary numbers. I've also given you some talking points and some highlights. So we're going to start out with the highlights of what's going on in each of these 4 areas. And to let you know, we are the only municipality in New York State that counts the MWBE goals the same as the state of New York. We took this directly from Article 15A, and the 4 areas, the 4 key areas of MWBE procurement that we count, which is public works construction, public works consulting, professional services consulting, and commodities, goods and services, is the same 4 areas that the state of New York counts when they are looking and grading themselves on their MWBE proficiency. So I'm gonna let LaQuanda McCullough, who is the current MWBE officer, begin the highlights section with you, and I'll kind of jump in as I need to.
Hello, everyone. So first of all, I want to highlight the public works construction side of the MWBE. Can you hear me?
Yes, I said I'm going to bring it up.
Oh, thank you. Okay. First and foremost, we achieved 44.2% out of the 30% overall goal, which also includes the MWBE, the DBE, as well as the SVDOB, I believe, Service Veteran Disabled Veterans. So, which is great. Currently, I want to highlight that SDVOB is not a New York State mandate. However, when it does become a mandate, then we will be looking to add that requirement into the legislative as well. We exceeded public works goals of 30% by 13.4 compared to fiscal year 18-19, which we were at 34.1%. Total diversity spend for public works construction is $11,329,800.20, which is about $6 million higher than our 18-19 fiscal year numbers. Awarding SDVOB as per state mandate. This is the first year we are actually seeing results in this area, which is great. Overall workforce goals exceeded in minority and a 2% decline in female. Female goals continues to be a challenge in construction. However, we have seen an improvement with that. DBE contracts lower overall workforce goals, but subcontracts are higher in amount.
So I kind of would jump in on this. DBE goals come in anywhere between 5 to 10%. And the reason being is these are federal contracts, and the dollar amounts of the contracts are substantially higher than anything we would have on the public works side most times. And DBE stands for Disabled Business Enterprises, for if in case anyone is wondering.
So that was going to be my request.
Not disabled,
Yes.
I'm sorry, disadvantaged business enterprise.
Could you break out the acronyms? Because
Yes.
we might
So
have a-
acronyms, MBE is Minority Business Enterprise, WBE is Women's Business Enterprise, DBE is Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and SDVOB is Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Business.
Thank you. Can you scroll down a little, please?
Sure.
Thank you. So our opportunities for this fiscal year, 2020-21, we would like to, of course, maintain or exceed the overall utilization goal. We're going to continue to do that. We would like to increase diversity spend, and that's determined by the total of construction projects that are actually bid out. So Rock the River projects should allow for increased spending. If the SDVOB goal of 6% becomes mandated, we will do an amendment to Ordinance 2018-54. We'd like to continue exceeding minority workforce goals and looking for ways to increase female workforce goals. We're currently actually working on looking into amending the apprenticeship legislation to open up more avenues for MWBE prime contracting and the potential to increase potential for MW to increase MWBE participation in that area. So you'll be hearing about that probably before the new year. The DBE certification process is a lot easier than the MWBE certification. So we're encouraging for folks to get out and do the dual certification, which will also increase diversity in that area as well. The next area, if you want to scroll down a little, is public works consulting. We've exceeded that goal as well this fiscal year, 31% out of 30. Thank you. The total MWBE spend for that area was $4,683,184.14, which were all new business opportunities that the city created. The data has shown that public works companies, consulting companies are embracing our MWBE programs and have been using women in the construction consulting, mainly engineers in the architecture area. The data shows that public works consulting companies are embracing our MWBE program and are increasing the use of subcontracting in construction consulting as well. Female workforce goals and consulting continues to increase, unlike in the construction area, which shows a decline. So that just basically says that we have more professional women, engineers and professions as such, other than in the actual construction arena.
And I think also what it shows is that several years back, and I think it was like 15, 16, we had a breakfast, myself, the mayor, and Commissioner Jones with the architectural and engineering companies. And we told them that this legislation was going to be forthcoming. You know, we didn't know exactly when, but that they needed to begin to prepare their workforces. And as you would expect, we heard every argument in the books as to why they could not achieve diversity goals because they were hard to find, there was a cyclical business, yada, yada. And we said, and my response to them at that time was, we're giving you enough time. You should diversify your organizations because that will give you the time that you need to, to be up to par when and if the time comes that we pass new legislation and have opportunities where you will have to succeed in order to participate in the city's projects. And so, I think that we've seen a real turnaround in this area, and that the consulting businesses have done a better job of diversifying. When we get in RFP proposals for consulting and we look through who's going to be the architects and the engineers on these jobs. We're seeing a lot more people of color and we're seeing a lot more women. They also are bringing in sub-consultants, small architectural and small engineering firms to subcontract part of the work out too. So they really have embraced it, and I'm happy to see these numbers.
I also want to highlight that the goal for the female utilization is 6.9%. We achieved 86.5%, which is amazing in that area. So opportunities moving forward, which will be continued to meet or exceed the utilization goal to increase the MWBE spend. And we'd like to actually do a survey to determine how much, if any, impact the city's workforce requirements have increased the diversity in local engineering firms, which obviously by the numbers it has, but we would like to just get that data as well.
Okay, so a quick question for you. So one, you to be commended on your female goal. That is just amazing and outstanding. The minority goal in this area seems to be a bit more challenging. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, I still think that it is the workforce goal overall for minorities in the architectural and engineering areas is low. I think that this is something that, and this was based upon this last year. I think if we look at the year before, it might have been a little bit higher. But when you look at the fact that it went from 0, I'm kind of happy that we got 10%.
I'm not kicking you, but it's my job to ask the question.
Oh, no. But I also think that's an area, like we said, that's an area of opportunity. That's an area where we need to increase. Like I said, now when we see who is internal to that organization, that will be project managers in specific areas on the projects, we are seeing a lot more people of color showing up. We're seeing a lot more women coming up. And just so you know, why the female goal is so high is because minority women are part of that mix, and minority women count as women. They do not count as minority.
That was going to be my next question.
Yes.
So is there any way, even though you do not count it, is that a number you can disaggregate out and give us? No, because I understand the point. I mean, the point is, hey, you counted one spot. We're not going to count one person 4 times. Right. But, it'd be nice to know if it's a minority woman.
I can look into that, Michael, and see if that is indeed something that we can break up. We use LCP Tracker to do our workforce data. And so it just kind of collates it all into one, because we're going based upon what the national requirements are for workforce, and the national requirements for workforce state that minority women are to be counted as women, and minority males are to be counted as minorities.
Right. And I get that. It's just, I think what happens though is that it may well be burying some of your success.
Right.
Because it's expressed more in one place than other, where it probably is a lot more even and still significantly pronounced.
Yep. But I'll see if we can run a report. That's a good question there, Michael. I will see if we can run a report on that. Female breakdown to minority. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next area. Professional. So I'm going to cover professional services, consulting, and commodities, goods, and services. So when we look at professional services contracts, we have to kind of look at them a little bit differently than we do our standard goals in the other areas. We look at the number of contracts that we award, and we look at what are the prime contractors that we have in those areas, as well as subcontractors. The same thing we're doing with the other MWBE goals. But we break our contracts down into what we call other contracts, other PSA award contracts to MWBEs, PSA contracts to MWBEs, and we add the two numbers together.
Can you tell us? Can you define what a professional services what these contracts are? What kind of work this is that you're talking about?
So professional services contracting, as I said, you probably weren't on the call in the beginning, but as I said before, the professional services contracts are those contracts that are done with individuals who have specialization in a particular area other than the technical consulting that we pull out under public works construction. These would be people like your HR consultants, your law consultants, your education consultants, your finance consultants, whatever, that we enter into contract with. And the city what the city does is it has all their contracts with other groups, whether they be nonprofits or community-based organizations or consultants. They group them all together under the title of PSA, Professional Services Agreement. And so when I began to start counting these numbers, I was finding very little in the professional services consulting area, but I was finding a whole bunch in the other category, which is those that are with nonprofits. And but of course, professional services organizations are all profit-making organizations as well. And so with the nonprofits and community-based organizations that we partner with, we had a lot of contracts. And I was like, wow, we got more of those contracts than we do the actual professional services. And so that's why I made the recommendation that in going forward, you know, we changed this number from 30% because when we set these goals, we set them based upon, you know, the state, and we based them up, we didn't base them upon knowledge. We didn't have the knowledge of what our workforce and what our marketplace looked like. So going forward, we now know that our marketplace does not have a lot of opportunities with municipalities around these areas. The corporations in this area use a lot of professional consultants, but municipalities, the county, the state, the city governments, the local governments, they don't use a lot of consultants, professional services, true professional services consultants. So that's how we were able to differentiate and look at it from professional services consultants and other contracts. But we awarded opportunities to subcontracting with the city as well as becoming prime contractors. But this is all new business. What you see listed here under professional services and under commodities, this is brand new business for the city. This is business we would have never had we not established Ordinance 2018-54. Our MWBE spend has increased about $141,000 over the first year that we did it. So we were happy to see that. In year one, we determined that the city does several different types of contracts, agreements, and law and the MWBE officer determined that, as I said, we would have them listed as PSAs and as other contracts. The other category shows higher awards and other contracts have primes that are usually go to nonprofit organizations that do not meet the MWBE criteria. In the other category, we did not meet the 30% factors. And again, that's because our area, our marketplace does not have a lot of opportunities for true professional services contracts. We're asking that the number be set to a more conservative number. Again, we're recommending 10%. Because if you look at the numbers that we were able to achieve in year one, we were able to achieve 10%, and in year two, 3%. So we know we can do 10%. Do we want to set a stretch goal of 15%? Perhaps. But that's something that I think you all are going to have to, help us decide here. We know it needs to be changed. It's just up to what you guys will feel comfortable with. Opportunities for this year right here is what we're trying to do is we're seeking approval to reduce the goal to, I said 5%, but that should have been 10 to 15%. Grow the number of prime. We want to grow the number of prime and subcontractors. We want to increase the MWBE spend to $100,000 plus. And we want to continue with our no waivers trend. One of the things you'll notice under construction is we have to always put in there what the contract total amount is, and then what's the amount after waivers. Well, if you look under our contracts for professional services, we do not have, and also for public works consulting, we don't have any waivers. We didn't do any waivers. We've not allowed one waiver in there. You're either gonna meet it or you're not. And so I think that, we want to continue that trend going forward. The last area that we're going to look at is commodities, goods, and services. We had given 13 contracts to MWBEs. And in this area, we look at not only the contracts, but the number of POs that are issued. Because even though we didn't give out contracts, if we have vendors that are sending us in POs and they are businesses of color, we also want to catch those numbers as well. The goal for year one was 15, for 18-19 was 5%, and we did 11.9%. And for this year, the goal was 10%, and we achieved 4%. As I stated in the beginning, one of the things that we didn't take into consideration when we were setting our goals, we knew that we had term contracts, so we set the goal to be 5% for year one, 10% for year two, and 15% for year three on. Is that we have contracts that, a lot of term contracts, and term contracts have the ability to be extended for up to 3 years. So one of the things that we did this year with COVID-19 was we issued extensions on pretty much 90% of the business that we had coming in so that we would not have to go out to bid, because we knew that people were not going to be responding. We were getting, with the first couple of times we sent stuff out to bid, we actually had no one bid on anything. So we contacted those companies and asked them, would they be willing to extend for another year? And they said yes, and they were thankful that we had contacted them. So that's why you see the numbers go down from 200 and something to 44, is because those contracts, because we only count new contracts. We don't count the fact that we're extending those contracts to the same vendor. We don't want to count them twice. So again, we need to determine, should the goal remain at 10%, right, the way it is right now? Do we want to increase it to 15% this next year? Right now, we are in year 3, and so we're looking at the fact that the goal for this year is 15%. We may want to wait and see what we do this year. Hopefully with COVID, things will get back to some semblance of normal, and we'll be able to look at the third year and make a determination going forward. But percentages are based on term contracts, as I said. So if the numbers go up, then we should, if the number of contracts go up, then we should see this percentage go up as well. So, are there any questions on any of that?
Yeah, Constance, I just have one question.
Sure.
Could we also, so I heard you say that you only count new contracts, but could we get a sense of how many contracts right now are still in term or underway? Both new and
Let's see if I
what's
can
been
pull up
extended?
report on the number of term contracts. Ooh. Do you want the ones that are currently have the capabilities of being extended, or do you want the ones that are on the last year of the extension and cannot, or both?
I would say both. It would just be
Okay.
good to see a whole picture of how many MWBEs we have out there in the universe working on something.
Okay. Now, let me tell you, when I give you this number, it's going to be inclusive of everyone. It's not going to be separated by MWBEs. The only time we know that a firm is MWBE is when we list out new contracts and someone comes in and fills out the paperwork and says, it'll say, are you an MWBE? And they check the box. Then we know they are an MWBE. We also make a concerted effort to solicit. We have the MWBE website, on the MWBE website of the city, we have a city directory that is encompassed MWBEs from the 9-county Finger Lakes region. We call that the City of Rochester directory. We update that quarterly. We do a drawdown from the state and we add in anybody that's currently on the list at that time, and we delete anybody that's no longer on the list from the state. So whenever you see this, it's pretty much as close to real time as we can get it.
Okay.
But we solicit, we'll pull up through our scope on that directory. Let's say we're looking for event services or something like that. We'll go into that list and we'll pull up event services, see who comes up, or plumbing. We'll go in and say who does plumbing services, plumbing supplies. We'll go in and we'll pull that list up and they will get solicited through BidNet. We'll put their actual email address into BidNet. And when we post it on BidNet, it gets sent directly to them. Well, I'll try to get those numbers for you. I think that it's going to be a more universal list than it will be MWBEs though. But at least we'll let you know which trend, you know, is going to occur during this next year. Any other questions? Anyone else want anything else?
No, I'll just make just a quick comment. It'll be interesting to see, you know, one of the challenges and things I'm really worried about as it relates to the pandemic constants is a data point of something like we're hearing that 33% of minority businesses may not survive this pandemic. So I'm wondering what effect that will have in the future. So that's kind of sad for me to hear that number. And then the other thing is, I
was going to say to you, Malik, just to that, we keep a listing of businesses that are no longer on the city's directory for whatever reason, because they may crop up on the list again. And sometimes if we know it's in a high commodities area, or if it's in an area where, like it's a plumber, we can't afford to lose any plumbers, we'll contact them and say, why are you no longer on the list? And if they say it's because of recertification, they forgot to recertify, then we will work with them to ensure that they get recertified so that they can get back on the list. Sometimes they'll say, well, we're closing our business. Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, we changed ownership and we're no longer 51% owned by a minority or a woman, so it could be any of those things, but we try to research it out to find out what it is so that if we can be an advocate and be of some assistance to them, we try to do that.
Great. And Constance, I don't know if do you have a way to quantify how many jobs are created or retained through as a result of MWBEs taking part in our work?
Now, when you say how many jobs are retained, because most MWBEs are brought on as subcontractors.
Right.
So when you say retained, do you mean workforce-wise?
Right. Yeah, workforce-wise. So
that would be more along the lines of those in the apprenticeship areas and stuff. And that's one of the things that we are right now in the process of working on. We've actually done a focus group and some other things, and we pulled together some research on it. And within the next, I would say right after the first of the year, you should be hearing something. We hope to have something to the mayor by the end of this month for her to review on our findings and how we are recommending to revamp the apprenticeship program so that it can be a little bit more inclusive. And we
Right.
did from the perspective of workforce development as opposed to MWBE.
In long term, would our goal be to get more prime MWBE businesses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
and we have been very successful at that. In 2017, right before I did this new legislation, we actually did a tally to show how many prime contractors we had as MWBEs in a given year. And we were really shocked. We had like 35 prime contractors that year, 10 of which were MWBE businesses. And we were like, oh my goodness, we didn't expect for that. We
Right.
didn't expect for that to be as high as it was. So that's one of the things that I really would like to begin to look at again, now that we've gone through these 2 years, is to look at, has that number gone down? Has that number gone up? Has it stayed the same? I do think that just from my own feelings, it may have gone down because a lot of the prime contractor businesses that we had outgrew their status as a MWBE and are no longer MWBEs. They're still women owned or they're still minority owned, but they've overachieved the net worth profile, or they changed ownership. Give you an example. One was Crosley Brownlee, Marietta Crosley. She changed her, she retired. She went on partial retirement. And so she gave extra shares to her 2 sons. And she came off as a WBE because just by changing her status, it changed the ownership of her company. So
Right.
she had to come off as an MWBE, as a WBE business, but she got major contracts with the city when she was a MWBE prime.
Right.
So there's a lot of little things that I know have occurred with these businesses and everything, but the majority of them still do a lot more subbing than they do prime work.
Right.
Off the top of my head, the prime contractors would probably be like Cummings Construction, Charlie Cummings, Steve General with Dave Bastiani. Help me, LaQuanda. Can you think of anybody else? Off just the top of my head, that's all I can think of right now.
Yeah, there hasn't really been, you summed it right up. Charlie.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Constance, this is Jose Pio. I have a question in regards to safeguards in place to make sure people are not taking advantage of this by showing that they're a minority women business owned and then taking the contract and then just giving it to somebody else to do the job. How do we safeguard against that kind of usage?
I can tell you that I can speak about myself because I was an MWBE officer from 2014 until February of this year, and LaQuanda just came on board. So what I did as the MWBE officer is on a monthly basis, I would visit companies, and I did a lot more. In a given month, I would probably visit like 6 businesses, 5 to 6 businesses, 3 of which would probably be WBE businesses. And I would make sure that I would get the ones that were in the construction areas. Not so much so in the consulting areas, but more in the construction areas. And I'd sit down with the owners of the company and say a trucking company. And I say this, I'm laughing because this is typical. Walk in, hi, I'm Constance, I'm the MWBE officer, and you are? Oh, I'm Joe such and such. And okay, Joe, that's fine. Do you have a partner? Oh yeah, that's my wife. She couldn't be here today. Okay, well, we'll reschedule this meeting until she can because this is about her status as a WBE. Oh, I can talk to you about that. No, you can't because you're not the W. You know, so it was things like that. You don't want to be rude about it, but I'd rather ask them the questions, particularly when people will contact me, WBEs contact me. I ask them some real tough questions, and I say to them, I'd rather be tough with you and ask you these questions than for you to get interviewed by the state and not be able to answer these questions. And it's very difficult for companies to become WBEs. It's easy if you are doing dual certification as an MWBE, so that you are a minority woman and you're doing dual status as a minority and as a woman-owned business. But if you are a white woman trying to get certified in the MWBE arena, they rake you over the coals because of all the fraud that was in the system before. So going forward, once COVID gets lifted, we hope to be able to, LaQuanda, to start doing these face-to-face meetings. But to any event, if we see a new WBE company prop up and it's in the construction area, we can set up a Zoom call with them and introduce herself to them moving forward.
We can also tell by the software and LCP tracker. We can our compliance officer is really good about, they're supposed to submit their pay apps. And if we see that, the MWBE sub isn't being paid, that's gonna create a red flag to, generate a conversation is when are you using them? Who's doing the work? Who did the work? That type of conversation. So there are systems in place to help us identify whether or not, misutilization is going on.
And we also have requirements in their MWBE paperwork. They sign an affidavit that says, I'm an MWBE business, I'm 51% minority or woman owned, and I understand that I am doing a subcontracting contract with the city, and that I cannot, as an MWBE, subcontract over 30% of my contract to a non-MWBE company without negating the fact that I'm an MWBE and the company will lose. So, and there have been some MWBEs in the carpeting industry, in the tile industries, floor laying and all that is where you'll find a lot of that. And they forget, because the business is so fluid, that, oh, wait a minute, this is a subcontract. I got to do this job myself, Sometimes we're able to catch them and tell them, hey, no, you need to correct that, because you can't give the rest of that contract out to this other flooring company. And another thing that we'll find too is in the manufacturing rep side of it, there'll be people that, like in the flooring industry, a lot of times you'll find manufacturers reps that represent a certain type of floor tile or carpeting or whatever. And people may want to order that carpet. If they don't have that manufacturing rep certification, they can't sell that carpet to them. So they have to then take that percentage of their contract that was for supply or for equipment or whatever, and they have to increase it or decrease it because they can't buy that product without negating their contract. So then they have to go back to the prime company and they have to say, hey, guess what? This is a manufacturer's contract, you've chosen, and we can't purchase that. So you need to speak with the city and let them know that our MWBE goal is going to go down because we can't do supply.
Well, Ms. Constance.
Yes.
And LaQuanda, I would ask, we normally block out about an hour of time for these particular work sessions. I would ask that if individuals would hold their questions for a second and so you guys can finish your presentation.
We're wrapping up. I just wanted to say that the last section that I sent to you was talking points. I gave these to the mayor because she always is looking for talking points when she goes out to do her MWBE presentations. So if you, let me go to that section here and so that you can see those talking points. Okay, and the first one says that the city of Rochester is the only municipality in New York State that has a four-pronged approach to MWBE procurement. to include public works construction, public works consulting, professional services consulting, and commodities, goods, and services. We are the City of Rochester's MWBE procurement plan is designed around Article 15A, and it is inclusive of the same 4 areas that the state uses to measure their successes. The City of Rochester's MWBE, the City of Rochester in a 24-month period from July of 18 to June of 20 spent almost $27.4 million with MWBE, DBE, and SDVOB businesses. The City of Rochester in fiscal year 18 spent about 6.1 million compared to our current MWBE spend, which was 21.3 million.
Can you scroll up a little bit, Constance, please?
Yep, that's what I'm doing now.
Thank you.
Let's see. The City of Rochester in a 24-month period of time spent 22% of its procurement dollars with diversity businesses. And in a 24-month period of time, we provided 356 partnership opportunities. So what we do is we look at the number of contracts we have with MWBEs under each area, as well as in the commodities areas, and we come up with 356 partnerships. And then lastly, the City of Rochester in a 24-month period of time achieved a combined workforce goal. Now that's taking all of the areas and adding them together of 42.3, of which 18.7 was women and 23.6% were minorities. The MWBE utilization for fiscal year 18 and 19 and 2021 is 33.6% for construction, 25.6 for public works consulting, 4.3 for professional services, and commodities, goods, and services, 9.7%. In its 2-year performance, the City of Rochester surpassed the state of New York in its MWBE consulting. We are at 26%, they're at 5%. So again, that's sad for the state, but I mean, I just think ours is sad too, but I think that's really sad for the state. And in fiscal year 1920, the City of Rochester surpassed the state in construction goals. The state was only at 29%, and we're at approximately 37%. So these are some good talking points you guys can take as you're out here in the community talking to your constituencies. And you can also, if people are asking you, what is the city doing? You can tell them we're doing, as I said to Councilman Lightfoot on a call about a week ago, we're doing that thing, you know? So I'm happy to see that we're doing this. Do we have a long way to go? Yes. But have we come a long way? Are we doing more than we did 3 years ago? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, LaQuanda, and thank you, Constance. I would agree that doing some great work. I think oftentimes one of our challenges that we have in this city is figuring out ways that we can more market ourselves and pat ourselves on the back, and for lack of a better term, to toot our own horn. Oftentimes we do this work, people see the work, they see the buildings, they see the infrastructure, they see things going up, but they don't understand necessarily the work that went behind it, internally, externally. They don't understand the amount of work and opportunities that have been provided for local companies, as well as individual city residents. They just don't know how to connect the dots. I think oftentimes, and let's just be honest, if we were not in COVID, and we did not have this YouTube video that is being sent all over YouTube and the internet right now, no one would even know of this discussion that we're having but us. And so it would be another kept secret, you know what I mean? So I think we can always do a better job. And you know, the mayor has commissioned the race commission with the county executive, and we're doing work around this space. And we realize that that the county, you talk about the state, but we can even look at our county that could use some of the work that the city is doing as a model for them to utilize as they begin to look at how they can better work in this space as well too. So we're exploring a lot of those recommendations on the Race Commission. We commend the work that you and LaQuanda, we welcome you, LaQuanda, if you're coming on new. We welcome you to our great family, of course, and thank you for the great work and for your great mentor of Constance. And we know that we're going to continue to do more work. We know there's a lot more work to do. However, we believe that we're in good hands, and we're looking forward to also, I'm very interested about ways of creating fast track programs for MWBE licensing as well too. So does any of my colleagues have any pressing, really dire questions that you would like to ask before we close up and wrap up this work session? Thank you. I was just going to ask you to stop here. Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
Just one, VP. I just want to make a statement that, I think one of the issues we have in the community is around language access. And I agree with VP Lightfoot on, finding a way to fast track some of these things so that people can get certified and get more people certified, because we have the skills. There's no question we have the skills in our community. It's figuring out how to make sure that we get them in the right place to be positioned for this work.
I agree.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you. Any final words, Constance or LaQuanda?
I was just gonna say, before closing, if there's any other questions that you all have, if you could do them just like you do with any other council meeting, if you could send them to Rosalind and I, then we, can review them and respond back to you all with those questions or concerns.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, LaQuanda. Thank you, Constance.
Thank
Protect
you.
your circle, wear your mask, stay safe,
Yeah.
guys.